Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. It is the November 16th, 2021 Board of Selectmen meeting. The meeting is called to order. As always, the meeting is being video recorded. We will begin by taking a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country. Thank you. All right. Our first item is the discussion of the elementary school and a potential vote on withdrawal of the statement of interest from the MSBA, and then to authorize the signing of a withdrawal certification from the MSBA. So Pete, Gus, I'll throw it out to each of you for comment, reaction, thoughts, emotions, feelings, diatribes, whatever you'd like. Pete?
Well, we seem to be not very far along, unfortunately, so in terms of getting a new school for the kids in town, so I'm not quite sure which way the people that are leading us on this are going to look to go next, but it seems a shame if we have to start over. I'm not quite sure what the vote means in terms of the pleasure of our residents. I know that there are lots of people that voted against it because they don't want any more taxes. So I think that group of voters would vote against any new school. It's clear that there are a lot of people that don't want the school at Wheelock. And I heard from some people that just didn't want a school that was that large. So I think of that as the people that didn't maybe hear all of the reasons why it's that large. I was sort of thinking that we were going to be hearing back from the school building committee and the schools as to what they wanted to do next, where they're sort of the ones in charge of the process.
Well, I did speak with Mike Quinlan today. I mean, they spoke to the MSBA, and that's why the agenda item is the withdrawal from the MSBA process at this point. There's not there's not an option to stay in. So I think that's formalizing that. I think obviously then we'll decide what to do next. But Gus, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I do. First off, before I even started my thoughts about this meeting, I want to just acknowledge the building committee, citizens in the town that were organized, citizens in the town that weren't organized, voices at the town meeting. This was a big project, and it was drawn out for a long time, and it didn't turn out where we thought it would turn out. But to be honest with you, there was a lot of people put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this project. And I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of effort that's been put into this. It did not all work out the way we thought or the way we'd hoped, I guess. But that should in no way detract from the effort, the time. And Mike, you were on the building committee, so on behalf of me at least, I'll acknowledge your efforts in this as well. But something like this isn't easy to do, and it's complicated, and it's not particularly simple to figure out how to orchestrate it. We had discussions here on our own board trying to gaze into our respective crystal balls, and nobody knew for sure, and now we are gazing again, and I guess we don't really know for sure even now. I have some thoughts, and these are all offered in the spirit of ideas, not positions. The first one is, I'm assuming at this point, I'm not assuming, but I'm suspecting at this point that the project, which was the MSBA project, is dead, and that there's not any path we're going to follow to try to resuscitate that and bring it back. So that's the first point. I think that's, especially when I saw the revised agenda,
yeah,
that certainly seemed like where we were going.
Yes.
The second point, because of how this unfolded, where I've come, I'm trying to picture the path forward. And so I'm going to put something out there for reactions either now or later. I think where we're headed is we are going to put a school in on the Dale Street site. There's a reason why I'm at least putting that out there to see if that is a sense of, I actually don't think it's just our sense. I think I think we need to involve the school committee, the superintendent, and others in this anyway. But for my part, Pete, to your comments, there are maybe some people who just won't put any money into a school. That's possible. I think there's a group of people who didn't want to put this much money into a school. I think there's some people who, and they may have more than one of these things. There's some people that had issues around, whether it's the water, whether it's the traffic. There's a whole bunch of other peripheral reasons that people may or may not have had on their mind in particular. And I think there's a group of people that wanted the Dale Street School because what the Dale Street School represents to the town, what it's meant for, there's a history, there's certainly location meant something to some people. In talking with a couple people and in listening to the town meeting and the video of that, the Dale Street School for many people represents something, and it's not a practical issue. If you drive around the Dale Street area and you look at the signs that are there, a lot of people saying, put the school here where I live. I think that's driven off of the role that the Dale Street School has played in Medfield and in people's interest to keep Medfield the kind of town that it's always been, to make sure it's that again. So I'll put that out there, that I actually think, given how this is all unfolded, if we have agreement, and I'm not just talking about the three of us, I do think the school committee and the superintendent, and in fact, in some ways, maybe it's more important for the schools to agree, but I'll at least put out on the table that I think as we think about this, we need to think about this as a project to replace the Dale Street School on the Dale Street site. So that's open for debate. It's just a stake I put in the ground. If we do that, then I think not only is the current project dead, but I think we're also making a decision that any new project will be carried forward without MSBA involvement. There are a couple reasons for that, because some of the requirements that the MSBA would have from a design standpoint might make it harder for us to find a school that would be ideal on the Dale Street site. And also, I'm assuming if we were to go back through the MSBA process, we would have to go through that same sort of a sequence of site selection and all that. And the whole reason I'm putting out the Dale Street site is I actually would like to see the town avoid going through that discussion a second time. So that's a third point. Fourth point, the fourth point, just for planning purposes, this is maybe not true, but as we think about what to do, it seems to me, in my head, I'm just putting us against just a thought that we should think about this as in a 5-year planning window. So if we do this again, what we're kind of thinking about is that we would have a project underway by 5 years from now, and whether it's complete, it could be underway in 3 years. I'm not saying it couldn't be, but where I'm taking it is I think we're going to have to deal with an issue around funding deferred maintenance on Dale Street to keep Dale Street functional and safe and clean and effective for whatever that planning window is. So to decide what deferred maintenance is the deferred maintenance we should be taking on, you kind of need to know what your planning window is, because that's going to tell you what's inside or outside the bucket. That's about as far as my thinking has gone in the less than 24 hours that I've had to think about. And all of those points are up for grabs. It's just that's sort of the framework I wound up with.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I think that's all fair. I mean, I think my original, and I've given it more than 24 hours of thought, because I certainly anticipated this was a possible outcome. I think there's kind of two pieces of it. There's the substance of it, which I think you've covered in the process of it. Mm-hmm. And I think we got to attend to both. I mean, obviously, I think if we agree that we're going to withdraw the statement of interest tonight, we should also dissolve the existing building committee. And so we've got to resolve the question of what is the next committee going to be, who's going to be on it, how's it going to be constituted, who's going to appoint it, what's their assignment going to be. And I think I would make the assignment a little broader than you've suggested, in the sense that, certainly we're not going to look at building a new school on Elm Street. I think that probably is not something that's going to happen in the near term. But I might leave the remit a little broader and look at what the options would be for replacing the Dale Street School, either with a new school there or with other options that might work at the existing location. So I think I'd be a little bit less prescriptive up front about what was involved. And obviously, the school committee has got deliberations and things to think about, because throughout the whole process, there were, there's competing desires, competing requests, even from an educational standpoint. I mean, one of the big sort of the big changes that happened in the course of the project was the school committee going from their preference for a 3 to 5 school to a 2-grade school, right? And I think one of the things that the school committee will have to decide is how important is that in the planning process. And while that won't necessarily drive it, but it would be an input saying, if they were to say our priority is to have grades 3 to 5 together, then the building committee would look at it and say, well, okay, if that's the priority to do that, what's the best way to achieve that from a capital standpoint? If that's what's going to drive the educational piece of it, it could be something else that would drive it, right? I mean, that's ultimately a school committee decision. It would be for the next building committee to kind of resolve the competing interests and the competing concerns that people have, to put something together that hopefully would have a smoother path than this one. So I think we all ought to give some thought to
Mike, I'm not sure I understand what that meant.
Okay.
And I'm not pushing back, I just honestly don't understand. When you said you had a broader remit, is the broader remit around location? Is it around that we might do something at Dale, but also do something at Wheelock in order to meet a configuration?
Yeah, I don't know. I just mean, instead of just saying, go build the best new school you can on this one site, to ask the question of how do you best replace this building. And it may be that we decide that the most cost-effective thing to do is to put money into the existing building. Maybe decide it's a complete additional renovation. It may be a new school. It may be, an addition to one of the other schools. Who knows what it would be? I'm just saying, in terms of what the cost-effective option is going to be, if we're not kind of tied to sort of the MSBA approach of, okay, we're replacing one school with one school, we can at least get full input and consideration and discussion about what those other options might be, if you're not kind of in that, where we have been since we were accepted into the program, which is, okay, you're picking one school to replace one school. What we're trying to do is replace this space, and it may be that one-for-one is the way to go. But obviously, I've expressed my view throughout the process that I think having 3 elementary schools is inefficient, given how expensive they are, and the administration and all that kind of stuff, and no one may agree with that, but I think it should at least be something that's considered in the process, that we're not just going to say, just go pick a school in this place and then foreclose other options that might be more cost-effective. Because obviously, cost is going to be a very big issue, and I'll give you one of those.
So there's one thing you said, and then you can come right in, Leah. The issue. Okay. Okay. There is a piece there that for sure I agree with, which is, now I'm still working off what I said. So I'm saying, well, there's a school here, but if there's a school at Dale, then the scheme for the school at Wheelock combined with the Wheelock school is not the scheme anymore. But part of this whole thing, one thing that I actually think in the tail end of our discussion, even in the positive report of the warrant committee at the town meeting, was a fuzziness. It's like, in other words, we're going to build a new school, and then 20 years from now, when we have to do Wheelock, then maybe we'll have a single school, or, it's like, maybe this is 3 grades, maybe it's not 3 grades, maybe it's 2 grades because of the enrollment. And it was like, as I was listening to it, it's like, we actually don't have a clear idea of what we are actually trying to do. So, not that I'm asking for it tonight, but what I'm saying is, given the circumstances, I think the school should be given a chance to step back and say, okay, if we now look 20 or 30 years into the future, this configuration we would like, given timing, sequence, scope, and nature of what we are likely to be able to do with buildings, is where we would drive for is, I don't know, the K through 1 and Memorial 2 and 3, I don't know what the answer to that all is, but at some point here, it would make more sense if we have to work with whatever it is we decide we're going to work with, we would think about organizing our school this way, as opposed to your point, as opposed to making single school incremental changes and then saying, we hope maybe if we do that, then this other thing will work out 20 years from now. It's like, maybe if we had a little clear idea where we're trying to get to overall, it would probably do a better, it might actually be more compelling to sell the schools for one thing. I know it would help me truly evaluate why are we doing what we're doing when we're doing it, because I'll see how it fits into a bigger picture. So not looking for the answer. I just think that's a question, and that's a question that the schools should be allowed to answer.
Well, I think I can speak to.
Can we get a microphone?
I'll start with yours, Gus. I think that the idea that about what the 20 years from now was the flexibility, and I think that some of that came from Mr. Marcucci throughout the course of this, because we didn't get the 3-grade school to, the ultimate idea was to create the campus model, right? So to limit the transitions and allow staff to follow students up, in consecutive grades, right? To provide those supports that are needed. And it's very hard to do when they're physically separated away from those campuses, which is why one of the reasons that, if we kept Memorial K1, putting a 4-5 at the Dale site didn't work. But now I'll kind of revert back. That was the short version of that. I'll revert back to what I think Mr. Marcucci was recommending, that maybe with a full analysis, and this could be done with an additional feasibility study, a town-wide feasibility study, not just on a particular building, which is what's done through, and I hate to reflect on my time in Sharon, but that's what we did do. We did do a town-wide feasibility study on all the buildings when we did it some 20 years ago. And it mapped out the sequence that we were, to do, and now ultimately doing the new high school now. It took that long. So what I think I'm hearing, Mr. Marcucci said, the outcome might be that maybe it is a shift in the buildings, and perhaps multiple changes at the buildings that this plan changes for, where it keeps existing structures but updates them and adds to them, renovates them to accordingly meet the needs and create the model, the best model we can with the spaces that we have today. So perhaps it is a K through 3 on the current Memorial Dale site, or a K through something, or maybe pre-K and K go to Wheelock and something happens at Memorial. I don't know, like whatever that could be. I think that's what, and you might be directly
Yeah, and it was
suggesting.
more on a process point in the sense
Yeah.
of being less prescriptive. Instead of telling the committee,
Yeah.
your
So-
job is to build the cheapest building at Dale Street that the the school can live with. Have a little
Yeah.
a little broader agenda. And I would hope we could do it in sooner than 5 years, right? I mean, we've done a lot of work, we've done a lot of research, we've got a lot of people interested.
I got to stop you here. One of the reasons I think this project failed is because we didn't do a good enough job of figuring out how to initiate and maintain an ongoing dialogue with the people in town. And the reason I stopped you, Mike, is because I feel like that's a discussion that's also almost a very technical, we're going to figure out what we need to do. And I think that there's a piece of this, I don't know what the answer is, and I don't discount any of the goals, the aspirations, or the rationales for why the schools would like to configure things in a certain way. But what I'm saying is that feasibility study, I think that would be good. But I think there has to be a parallel dialogue with people that picks up not just on pure economics, not even just on pure education philosophy right now, but also allows the input from people here in town to somehow or another feed their I don't know what to call it, their loyalty, their commitment, their view of what the town is into that mix. And I think,
I think that's
just look
what
at
I think
we
we
didn't
did.
do a good enough job.
Yeah, I think that's what the next building committee would do. I mean, that would be in that process. Hope would be would not be a prescriptive process, right? So,
And that would be fine. The only thing then that means there's certain kinds of people that are on that building committee. The thing I wrestle with, Mike, and I'm not staking out positions here. I wonder sometimes whether that building committee will need to have a clearer definition of the town's intent, so that when it creates a school, it has that input around the town's intent, and it gets that as an input. Here's what you have to be thinking about, and some of these things aren't classic education philosophy. They're not even, I'm the cost guy, they're not even necessarily the absolute most cost-effective. It's that people care about something here, and we don't want to lose this essential element of what Medfield's about. Having a way for that conversation to get itself into this discussion early, I think will set that next building committee up for success. If that building committee has people with those skills and perspectives, maybe it can be done inside the building committee.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. It might be.
If it can,
Yeah.
but that's not, it's not just a mechanical process.
Oh, no,
is
yeah.
what I'm saying.
I think I echo both of your sentiments in that process. I guess I'm probably thinking, like Mike might be thinking, on the sense of there has been a lot of work done around that particular site. And there was a lot of sketches and a lot of research done around the Dale Street site as part of the study. The longer you wait, the more it ages, and it has to be done again, I guess. And so building on the momentum of trying to have a positive outcome, from, the town, this process the town just went through, could be, okay, now we know everyone's more invested than before. And we don't have to contend with COVID as much, knock on wood. It might be worthwhile to take advantage of that momentum to gain that input, since people seem like they want to have a lot of input. So
Yeah.
regardless of, whether it's education related or not, or historically related, so.
I did have one other thought on that point, is whether it would make sense for the school committee and at least the Board of Selectmen and School Committee, and I was wrestling whether the warrant committee needs to be in on this, but whether we should just hold a joint public hearing to let, we could have this kind of a discussion within more than 24 hours to distill it, and then open it up to the people that have things that they want to say. We're not over-engineering it. We're not expecting a specification for a building coming out of it, but just to have that hearing is partly for us to have a joint discussion, but partly to let people react, provide inputs, just so we all have our heads screwed on straight.
Like a high school auditorium type
Yeah.
forum thing. I agree. Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody think we should not withdraw our statement of interest? Do that? I mean, I think we have to have further discussion, and I do think we should not lose sight of the need to develop a process that's going to be kind of broadly acceptable to people. I think what you're driving at should be done under the auspices of the subsequent building committee, because it can have a broader charter than what, an MSBA chartered committee, has. And
So we just have to be thoughtful about who's on it.
Yeah. No, I think it'd have to be a mix of people, and hopefully engaging people on both sides of this most recent issue.
no,
So
that-
Elaine,
Yeah,
you have the
so-
microphone?
Yeah, I do.
It does.
All right.
Yes, I do.
First and probably last 30 speakers that have one before you.
So I think Eileen Murphy, just to introduce myself here, and Gus, I appreciate what you're saying, and I think that if we could get a forum together, something that I read today that bothered me, and I said this to Mike when I first walked in, is I'm reading that there's an impression from the superintendent that this town passed on and we don't want a new school. I will sit here emphatically and say we absolutely want a new school, that many letters to the editor clearly stated, and I'll say one of them, that I want a new school. I really did not want the location. All right, and I happened to go back and read the 2018 warrant today just to refresh myself, and I think part of the confusion, and there was no ill intent, everyone worked their ass off. We all, we've said that many a times, but the warrant article clearly stressed it was going to be Dale, the replacement, or reno or demo. If it was thought of at that time, it could have been somewhere else. I think it would have opened a dialogue from day one. And when it got brought to the point where, and Mike, you triggered me at town meeting, Good, Bad, or Indifferent in May, when I found out that timeout, we weren't going to be talking about this anymore. There was no more discussion to be had. That struck a chord with me that, that's not what this town's about. So I'm so happy to hear you say, let's bring everyone together, because we're all in this together. And this, hopefully getting out of bed this morning, there is no divide in this town. That we are in this together. This is about families. I don't even have kids, right? So I'm not trying to pick on any school or any superintendent or any teacher. I want this to be a community where we can walk down the street and everyone's in this together. And we tried to do that. Even yesterday with the yeses and the nos, we're having fun, because at the end of the day, it's about the town showing up the way they did in a record number. So I applaud the town. And nothing. Microphone, anyone?
I got a couple of folks, just for the folks on Zoom, I'll take a couple of, I see one hand raised, Lester Cohen has his hand raised, I'll hear from Lester, and then we'll close discussion on this point, and we'll vote, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. This will obviously be on the next agenda when we meet, and there'll be further discussions to be had. So if we could promote Lester, Nick? I'm assuming he wants to be promoted, or you can also do a Q&A, Lester. It's up to you. Let's see.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Lester.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I think a lot of people underestimated the effect of what I considered was the lack of communication between the different sites, whether it's the Dale Street or the Elm Street. I also think, which was brought up a little bit earlier by Gus, that the scope of the school that was proposed seemed to me and to other people to be way oversized compared to where a lot of people think it needs to be. And the more input that you can get from the community, in fact, I would suggest that perhaps, at town elections, once a year, you have some non-binding questions that are on the ballot to see what people would accept. I mean, there certainly may be people that would accept no increase in taxes for schools. I'm not one of them. I certainly think it's worthwhile, but not something that's almost 50% overscoped. And the more communications you have with the town, the more communications that the school committee has with the town, and not just at meetings, because, at the meeting at the high school, when almost 2/3 of the people said yes, at the town election, where twice as many people showed up, more than 50% said no. So you really have to get a better understanding of where the town is. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester, appreciate it. All right, so I think we have 3 votes then. Vote to sign a letter to the MSBA withdrawing the statement of interest. Vote to authorize, I think I sign it, the withdrawal certification, and then vote to dissolve the school building committee effective, I think, at the end of their meeting tomorrow. I don't think we want to dissolve the committee before it meets again, but.
So, Mike, what is the position of the superintendent and the school committee on these issues?
The position of the superintendent is he wants us to sign the withdrawal as well, so does Mike Quinlan. They just don't see a MSBA path forward. They spoke to the MSBA today.
Okay.
So,
Mike, as far as
and the reason we're adding this is that we want to get on their December 15th board meeting for withdrawal. The next board meeting is not till March. So,
Mike, as far as the building committee, dissolving the building committee goes, is there any, I guess potential would be a better word than advantage, is there any potential for the building committee to give us, to not dissolve quite so quickly in order to meet?
well, we're going to meet tomorrow.
Okay.
We're going to meet tomorrow to provide a final word.
Okay, so that's
whatever you're
okay. You're
looking
gonna
for
get a
from the
final
building
word.
committee, you have to get it tomorrow. Because dissolution or not, I'm not sure you're going to get us back together again, so.
Well,
After
I guess
that.
that answers my question. Okay, all right, got it.
I mean, if it's a command performance for you guys, so we can do it, but.
No,
I think
no,
that was
I'm not- that's
the
not it.
suggestion,
That's not
but.
it. Nope, okay.
So is the,
What were you interested in? I'm curious.
2 things, maybe 3 things. One would be, if you're going to get all the final word from the building committee tomorrow in their meeting, that was the first thing I had. What advice do you have for us? You went through this, you worked hard, it didn't work out. Part of me wants to make sure the building committee understands that, at least, I think, speaking probably for more than me, that I absolutely recognize and respect and appreciate the effort of the building committee. So part of me is saying, well, yeah, booting them out the door a day after a board of selectmen meeting seems a little extreme, but the real point
I
there
don't
is
think
that
you're going to get any objection from anybody.
I'm still not, I mean, yeah, all right. Well, yeah.
I mean, you could bring popsicles by tomorrow night if you'd like. I mean, that's always a nice
Nope.
way.
Nope, that's not what I want.
Almost consider another.
They do, okay.
so that was,
That I-
That was the, 2 other questions? Any other questions?
Nope.
No? Okay.
so Mike, that was one of my questions too, is the members of the school building committee asking to dissolve, they don't want to continue serving, is that what
Well,
I'm
I think
hearing?
the idea is we're obviously not going to move forward with the same committee, and it's better to just, not have it still
Reconstitute the
around.
committee?
Yeah, I mean, I think just then we'll reconstitute a future committee at some point. I mean, it doesn't like kick us out of town. Like, we'll all be available for,
Right.
future consultation as needed. It's more formal and consistent with our policy adopted in 2017, Gus, of dissolving committees once they're, utility is no longer needed.
Feels like we're putting them out the door. That's all.
Yeah, well,
I would not want to violate any of our policies.
Yeah.
We only have a few.
yeah, that's true. All right, Gus, do you want to start with a motion to vote to sign a letter to the MSBA withdrawing the statement of interest?
Yes, I move that we sign a letter to the MSBA indicating that we are withdrawing our statement of interest in
Second.
building a new school.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, next, vote to authorize, I think it's authorize me, but me or any other person, if not me, authorized to sign the withdrawal certification, which I think comes back to us from them.
So this is us authorizing the chair to sign?
Sign a
Okay.
withdrawal certification, which is their response to our letter.
Okay. I move that we authorize the chair to sign the withdrawal certification with the MSBA.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right, and then a motion to dissolve the Dale Street School Building Committee effective as of the conclusion of its meeting tomorrow night.
Okay. I move that we dissolve the Dale Street Building Committee effective at the conclusion of their meeting tomorrow night.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right, that's done with that. There are some questions here in the chat, which I'll get to over the course of the night, or actually, for those of you who have questions in the chat about responsibility for the physical plan of Dale and the like, I'd suggest emailing, you can email the school committee or email the superintendent about that. And then we did discuss briefly about the process for forming a new committee. I think there's general consensus we'll have to do that, and we'll have discussions over the course of the next few weeks about the best process forward. So I think that answers those
Are we,
questions.
would we move ahead with the public hearing without, we don't need a committee to be formed to have that public
We
hearing?
can have the
so we
public,
could just
yeah, I think,
do that.
Leo, the school committee is meeting Thursday? Thursday. So, I think the warrant committee has declared they're not engaging in any town activities until January, but if
That is true.
if they wanted to participate, they are welcome, but I might.
Wait a minute, this is the start of their busy season.
So they were all told and they agreed to do it, so. All right, next, Facilities Director Amy Colleran requests us to vote to authorize $25,000. Oh,
Can I ask one question? I'm sorry, I'm slow.
well, we're now on to the boiler repair at Blake Middle School, Mr. Potts. Is it
for it.
relating to that issue, Mr.?
No, I didn't get the mic fast enough unless.
You may ask one question.
Jerry Potts, 7 Curve Street. On that form, if we could just, the discussion about the school building committee and the constitution of that and potential bylaw, is that something we could add to the agenda of that forum?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to,
Yep.
And I have a follow-up question on that. Given we are developing a school on our own, not under the MSBA, are we bound by? So we may follow it just because that's the procedure, but we're not actually bound by having to do that, just to follow up on your
No, we're
question.
not bound by the MSBA rules,
No.
we're not doing it, right, yeah. So.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's unlikely that we would conclude to do it, but that's something the committee would consider too, to even want to reapply to the MSBA, but. All right, Facilities Director Amy Colleran requests vote to authorize $25,000 from the Emergency Repair Fund for repairs to the boiler at Blake Middle School. Any questions? I saw in the email that they've already given away 2/3 of whatever this part is that they're replacing,
Yes,
and they're holding it for us for a week.
for a week. And when if you remember, Amy was in about a year ago, and we were discussing the replacement of this boiler. We knew that this could be an option because we were running that one, that we would have to
Right.
replace this one, so.
Okay. Any questions, Pete?
Nope.
Gus?
Yes, is it 25,000 or 30,000? Because Amy's thing talked about 25,000 plus 5,000 for miscellaneous expenses.
Her email was, she has a quote for 20,000, she was asking for a total of 25,000.
She's a good
Cover any
negotiator.
unforeseen circumstances.
Okay. All right, good. Let's see, ready?
Yep.
I move that we authorize $25,000 from the Emergency Repair Fund for repairs to the boiler at the Blake Middle School.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, and then the next is a request for me to sign the Green Communities Annual Report.
So this was in the packet. This is the annual report on the projects that have been undertaken in recent years and projected to take place over the next couple of years with Green Communities funding, as well as other various criteria that we have to report on an annual basis to the state to maintain our green community status.
We had very specific instructions on this form.
Yes, and it took quite an effort to get it into a format to get in the packet, so it's not
Do you
the
know
most
if they
user-friendly system.
load this into some sort of database, like why they do it this way? They must load it into some sort of database,
I think it all gets up into the state,
Right.
and somebody gets credit for what we're doing and
Yeah.
what they're doing to help us do what we're doing.
And this was thanks to Amy and to Susan McPhee?
Yes, they've been working on it.
Working this, and probably Nick as well.
And the Energy Committee.
And the Energy Committee. So thank you to the Energy Committee, Amy, Susan McPhee. Any questions, Pete?
No?
Gus?
Are you going to read it before you sign it?
I've already read it.
Good. Okay, so
already read it. I did
public
notice-
service announcement. This thing is a really bureaucratic form, but 2 years ago when I was asked to sign it, I was asked to sign the cover sheet. I said I wouldn't do it without reading this green annual report. It's really terrible format, but for anybody who has any interest in what the Energy Committee has been doing to help the town, it's worth, and I think you can get it on the Energy Committee website. I know it's there. It's dry reading, but you might want to read it because there's a heck of a lot that's gone on over the last couple of years to try to improve things. So I was glad I said I wouldn't sign the cover sheet without reading it. I had to read it like in 24 hours, and I was glad that I did. So if anybody cares about energy, it's worth taking the time to read it through at least once so you know what we do.
Well, and this is the big benefit of being a green community. You get these multi-$100,000 grants from the DO.
That's big bucks.
All right, motion.
I move that we, I get my glasses on to read what our motion is here. I move that we authorize the chair to sign the Green Communities Annual Report.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Opposed? None. All right, next, request from Town Planner Sarah Raposa, asking us to approve a contract with Tetra Tech for stormwater engineering consulting peer review services for the Board of Health. Christine or Nick, anything?
Yeah, so we had done a solicitation to replace our former peer review, which was EBI, and Tetra Tech was deemed to be the most qualified, and their hourly rates were competitive.
Anything else? Any questions, comments, Pete?
This is all getting paid by the applicants, it looks like, so
Correct.
we're
So
good with it.
that's why the cost is TBD, because that was my question, is the cost was TBD.
You should have a cost sheet at your.
There wasn't a cost sheet.
No, we printed one out, should be at your, I think I have all of them.
Right.
I have all of them.
On the cover sheet, I wrote TBD because it's on a case-by-case basis based on the scope of the application that is borne by the applicant to the Board of Health at that time.
So it's TBD because it's zero to the town.
Zero to the
Right.
town.
Okay, that would be the important question I have.
Yes,
Okay.
no expense to us.
Bill's got a question if
Just a couple of things. Bill Massaro, 36 Evergreen Way.
Thank you.
Is this, the cover sheet looks like it's a new form that I haven't seen, don't remember seeing it before in the data package. Was it in there before?
the
The cover sheet, the contract cover sheet?
Yeah, we've had them in there before.
Oh, okay, all right.
We're trying to make it easier for people to read what the contracts are on a summary basis.
I thought it was nice. One of the things you might put in there is whether it was a competitive bid or not a competitive bid or whatever. That would be something worth looking at. I mean, that's what I used to do for a living, right? So it looks good to see that, and if it's like under $25,000 or whatever the right number is, you can just make a note there. I think that would be interesting to read about. I think this is probably a good thing, and I think it's well-timed because stormwater management is going to be a big issue at the hospital. So, I mean, now I don't know if your contract will still be there, but I notice you have options.
Yeah, and this is not
One
a
of
new
your
contract.
options.
Board of Health always has
Yeah.
peer review
So-
on staff through a contract.
So I think it's very timely. So.
Thanks.
Anything else?
No?
All right, Gus?
All right, I move that we approve the contract with Tetra Tech for stormwater engineering consulting peer review services for the Board of Health.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next is a contract with Brovitz Community Planning and Design for planning and zoning consulting services for open space, residential zoning, and mixed use. This was one, we got a grant for this, right?
Yes, you just accepted the grant award at the last meeting.
Right.
$50,000 grant, $50,000
Yes.
contract.
And I noticed these snuck in $5,000 for a sidewalk in there.
We're looking at it.
Nice, very good. To design a sidewalk, not to build a sidewalk, $5,000 will get you about 3 feet of sidewalk.
I will have a question on that. Again, Bill Massaro again. In the proposal from Brovitz, they made reference to what they, I'm quoting here, the recently enacted townwide master plan. And, I mean, did I miss something? Has it been enacted?
The
It
planning
has.
board approved the town.
And that was the enactment?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
The Board of Selectmen didn't act on it one way or the other because it's not our bailiwick.
Just curious. I mean, I did see that the planning board had approved it. I wasn't sure what that
Yep.
meant for the whole town. My other question is, I understand that what task 2 is, which is essentially the basis of the grant, which says we're going to improve the 109 corridor. I'm not sure about task 1, which is residential open space, and changing that. Was that just for the corridor, or is that for the rest of the
You're
town?
close down, but Sarah, can you speak to that, please?
Sure.
Oh.
You hear me?
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So actually, it's pretty interesting because I was going to talk about open space residential subdivisions tonight as part of the roads discussion. But essentially, Medfield adopted an open space residential development zoning article in the 80s, and it was used 4 times, and the last time it was used was in the early 90s. So it's time to update, modernize that cluster zoning is something that a more recent, more modern model bylaw would be known as natural resources protection zoning. So there's options to update that and maybe make it actually a little bit more usable.
I was just noticing, though, like, for example, like some of that talks about, like, for example, a requirement for 25% open, and all, it's all going to be changed. Is there going to be ultimately be a public review or a planning board review of what the changes are physically, or?
Oh, for sure. So it's just a concept at this point to try to get some actual work down on paper, get some things for the community to be involved in preparing and to react to. So it's quite a long process. It won't be at town meeting this coming year, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Pete, anything else on this?
No.
Yeah, Sarah, I had actually 2 questions for you, and what I did is I went through all my records and I pulled out the rapid recovery plan. We have the master plan. We have the housing plan, and when I looked at the scope for this, particularly around the corridor, and I went to the rapid recovery plan, it seemed like we've had a number of consultants that have all sort of looked at this, that 109 issue. And this is probably a dumb question, but I get to do that a couple times in every meeting, and this would be one of them. How does this particular piece of work relate to, like, that rapid recovery plan, relate to our master plan? How does it plug in, and is it, I couldn't tell whether it was actually doing work that's new, or whether it was doing work that's almost a repeat of what some other consultants have already done in some of the stuff that it's called out.
Yeah, so the concepts are called out similarly, but it's an actual implementation of action items in the master plan implementation table. So I don't know if you probably don't recall the grant application. We actually took strategies right from that implementation plan to develop this vote for the grant.
So I think the OSRD stuff is also in the rapid recovery plan. I'm just trying to understand how these things all connect. So I'm not fighting any of it. I just looked at it and said, how do these things relate?
Yeah, so I would say that the rapid recovery, not so much by what you're seeing there for that planning, but definitely master plan and definitely housing production plans stuff.
Okay, so those
Stuff
things,
that's kind of been on minds for a little while. But the rapid recovery planning, you definitely want to have more life and bodies and people around downtown. So I wouldn't say that's a rapid implementation, but it definitely fulfills a couple other overarching goals.
okay, I guess intuitively for me, those things connect in the sense that if you want to draw people to downtown, then the mixed-use type stuff that we're talking about here seems to support that, and maybe even some of the residential stuff gets them to live downtown so that they probably walk downtown. I was just looking to understand the coherence across all the things we've looked at, that's all.
The planning board actually has a list of, personal and board initiatives that they've been looking at, and updating the mixed-use zoning has been on that list for a really long time. So some of the things maybe from these more recent planning documents aren't actually new ideas. There are definitely things that have been kicked around for a little while. But, when do we ever have the opportunity to get a grant to get some, planning work done? So some of these things, even though they don't coalesce perfectly,
Yep.
they're all things that the planning board's been wanting to do. The other thing that we got the grant for, but we didn't get the contract in your packet in time, was for the zoning diagnostic, which was also found in the master plan.
Okay, thanks.
Sarah, could you share that to-do list with us?
Yeah, it's kind of, yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Anything else? All right, motion?
I move that we approve the contract with Brovitz Community Planning and Design for planning and zoning consulting services for open space residential zoning and mixed-use zoning.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks.
I'm sorry, if you wouldn't mind, I just noticed that one of the questions said, can we have them design a sidewalk for the remaining portion of Kerr Street? And the only reason why that the conceptual sidewalk design is included in that grant is because it's 109 and that the section of 109 that does not have a sidewalk. So it wouldn't be possible to include Kerr Street.
And I would say that if we paid people to design the sidewalk on every street where people would like a sidewalk, it would probably cost more than the next school would to do that, given if the,
Yeah, and it's really not a
the desire for
conceptual
sidewalks that would
design.
come, yeah.
It's-
Yeah, people like sidewalks. All right. Speaking of sidewalks or quasi-like sidewalk things, private ways, Mo. Thank you, Sarah.
Don't go anywhere, Sarah.
They're staying for this.
Oh, you're staying for private ways as well. So, do you want to give us a little background here? I know this is something you and I have talked about
Yeah.
a lot, and another thing we hear about a lot. So,
With Sarah and I, we kind of want to open a discussion with the selectmen to discuss private roads, where they came from, how decisions were made in the past, some of the history behind it, and kind of get into the process of acceptance. The reasons why we have standards in our subdivision rules and regs, and I don't think we're looking to make any decisions on anything tonight, just to kind of clarify things and to kind of discuss what these processes are and how, what we're thinking. So I know Sarah's got a little bit of a little presentation that she wanted to do. You still doing that, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm just gonna bring up my screen now. Okay, so I know that you received requests for consideration for rhododendron, some of the streets at Hawthorne Estates and at Bridal Field. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a primer on roads. Massachusetts laws and the associated case law is plentiful. So I guess the moral here is there's no one answer for a variety of situations. So I just wanted to put together a few bits of information about those particular streets that you have in front of you, and also Sorry, bringing a little lucky. And just a couple of bits of information about how people perceive streets. So a public way is a way that's actually been laid out and accepted as a public way by town meeting. And we, in town hall, have a list of those accepted ways. And the list is specific. It talks about what town meeting they were accepted at, how much of the road was accepted. Sometimes portions of roads remain private or unaccepted. A private way is going to be something that is not built to the specifications that are found in the planning board's rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land, and very likely received a developer would have received a waiver from the planning board, and that's usually in exchange for some sort of public benefit, either most often it's trail easements, but public lands, public access has always been really important to the town. Unaccepted ways are roads that were built but then never brought forth for acceptance. And then of course you have paper streets that were laid out as streets but never constructed. So on maps they look like roads, but they don't have any roads on the ground. The last time we did an acceptance process, I want to say was maybe 3-4 years ago. So I'll just give you a quick outline of the process. The first thing that you need to do as the Board of Selectmen is receive a petition in some form to ask you to lay out the road. That plan is going to show the meets and bounds of the road. Oftentimes it's the same plan that we'll see during the subdivision process. You're also going to get a little bit of title research, especially if it's a road that has been private for some time and there might be ownership of to the center line. And again, there's different, sometimes the developer will retain the fee in the road, sometimes the lot owners will own to the center line. That's not part of their lot, but they do own it. And then you've got 45 days to send to vote your intention, and within that 45 days, the planning board gives you a non-binding report. And then you actually have a meeting with the petitioners, where you have to send notice to the lot owners. And if you do vote to accept the layout, then that goes to the town clerk's office at least 7 days prior to a town meeting. Then, of course, some of these roads may be substandard, and the funding source for acquisition costs or betterments for improvement needs to be discussed. But next to town meeting, there are specific requirements for the votes, and then specific requirements for what needs to be done just after town meeting. So, rhododendron is a road off of Spring Street. We have access to a plan from November 26, 1928 by Frank Cheney, and this is part of the AMOC Kingsbury property. This is actually the only bit of information that I could find in my brief research on rhododendron. Hawthorne Estates, that was an open space residential subdivision. Mark Sorrell actually was on the planning board at the time. He gave me quite an education about what precipitated this version of this subdivision, and how, and Pete, you actually might remember this too, if that was coincided with your time on the ZBA, because open space residential developments require a special permit from the ZBA because it's decreased lot sizes and other dimensional requirements in exchange for conservation land of some sort. So you'll see here we have a ZBA special permit and a planning board approval. And in this circumstance, Hawthorne, the main road coming in, up into the subdivision is a public way that went through the town meeting process. But Alcott and Walden were required to be private as a condition of subdivision approval. So I believe, and we have to check with town council, that not only if they were to petition the town for acceptance, I believe it would also require a formal modification of the subdivision approval through the planning board as well. And, you know, this is the type of roadway plan and profile information. I know you cannot see this at all, and it's actually quite old. But these are the lists of the waivers that the planning board will grant to these types of subdivisions in exchange for these private road designations. And so Bridalfield Lane, that was originally approved by the ZBA in 1999 and by the planning board in 2000. And then I don't want to confuse you by having that subsequent special permit. But the other thing that's really interesting about open-space residential developments is that they're kind of considered multifamily developments where there's only so much FAR floor area ratio to go around. And in this subdivision, there was a request later for clarification or an amount of floor area ratio that could be built. So not to confuse you too much. This one actually is built very close to the standard found in the planning board's rules and regulations, but subsequently in 2002, the developer came back and asked for a waiver from curbing and berm standards. And in 2002, the planning board placed the condition that Bridalfield is to remain a private way. And then there's some of your roadway plans and profiles from Bridalfield. And that's the end of my primer.
Thank you. Mo, do you?
Well, I just want to kind of talk about the standards that we have in the subdivision rules and regs and why we have them. You know, a lot of these roadways that are private, that are built, that are not up to the standards of the town, there's reasons why we ask for them, whether it's curbing, when we go in there and plow, we don't want to rip up everybody's lawns during the process. We want, you know, we'd like to have the fire hydrants out there for fire flow, also for to flush so that we get all the sediments out of, because it is connected to the town's system. Same thing with the sewer. We look at the width of the roadways. I know the fire department has issues at times where if the cul-de-sac or the dead end, there's no turnaround or not a big enough turnaround for them to safely turn around and get out of that subdivision, and having to back up all the way down the street, that's an issue. As you know, during the winters, especially in, I believe, 2015, when we had back-to-back storms, that roadways get narrower and narrower. And when you have a roadway that's not up to the standards of where we like to see the width of the roadways, they're very difficult for us to maintain without having to do snow removal in all the subdivisions. So there's a lot of reasons why we ask for the standards. And with the private roads, like I said, you do get waivers that are difficult for us to provide services for if the roadways are accepted.
Yeah. So just to give both of you a sense of how this came up originally, obviously we get these requests from time to time. There's also, I think it's fair to say, when we sat down about this, something of a scattershot approach to, you know, which roads we plow, which roads we don't plow, which roads we treat as their public roads, which ones we don't. And I would imagine that every single one of these private ways that was accepted as a private way has its own little story behind it as to why that was the case. And so we get these requests from time to time from people on various streets who want to have their streets accepted. Frequently, there are streets that don't meet the standards for roads. And so what I would like to explore is whether we can come up with some sort of rubric or policy that we could apply generally to these kinds of requests, so that we're not just dealing with, to Sarah's point, we're not just dealing with them on an ad hoc basis and sort of making up a rule for each road that comes up to it. It could be a very strict policy saying, nope, you've got to bring the road up to our standards before we accept it. It could be somewhere in between that it's kind of a cost-sharing issue between the town and the people on the street who want to have it accepted as a public way. We could sort of put a cutoff to say, because the issue is that a lot of these were accepted as private ways. The developer is long gone. So the original theory was that, like in a condominium or what have you, that the developer owns the land, the developer is probably owned by the estate of the developer, and so there's nobody really keeping up the roads. The more recent ones where we have kind of a more deliberate process, I think for the most part there is at least a mechanism in place to maintain those roads after the developer moves on. But we do have lots of them. I mean, we have...
Well, the ones that fit this criteria we're talking about is probably about 20 to 22 of them. There might be a little bit less. I know Sarah's been trying to narrow that list down a little bit, but I believe there's about 20, 22 subdivisions that are possible candidates.
And one of the issues we have is people move in, and either it's a disclosure that they get or it's not a disclosure that they get, but they move in and they're surprised to find out that what looks like a road that they live on is really more of a shared driveway, at least from the standpoint of the town, and they would like the town to maintain those roads and the rest of it. Most of them are not up to our standard for what we have, so it creates problems. And so I want to explore if we can come up with some sort of a program where if a street wanted to come in, we have a defined amount. Okay, here's how much we expect people to pay via betterments. Here's how close you have to get to the standard, that the DPW can live with it, the police and fire can live with it. Because the reality is, and there's an interest for the town as well, if there's a fire down the end of the street, we're not going to say, well, that's a private way, it's not up to standard, we're not going to drive down your road. Or, if we have town water underneath the road, we're going to go in, we're going to fix the water. So there's all this whole kind of system that has developed over time, that it would be good, if possible, to rationalize in a way that's fair, so that it's not just a matter of this particular street got organized this time and wanted to do it, they got one deal, and then another street comes along 2 years later. It would be nice if people could kind of, go to the website and say, okay, we're a private way, here's what you have to do. You have to get the people on the road to agree, here's what the town would expect, here's what you have to do, and we're not sort of negotiating each one separately. There'll be some technical pieces of it. So that was the idea, was could we get there, as opposed to sticking in the land of ad hocery where we are now, because the ones we've done more recently have been sort of deliberate, right? We did, was it Eric Road the last one we did? Yeah, Eric Road, where the developer intended, when the developer built the road, that when it was over, it would be accepted as a public road. So it was built to that standard, it's going to be accepted as a public road. But we have a lot of these older ones that was not what was intended. I mean, a lot of times I think some of them were to avoid further development in the particular area, or because we got the easement and all the rest of it. So there's a whole patchwork of roads and rules and deals that have been made. And so in talking to Mo and having had these discussions with people over the years and gotten a few more recently, I wanted to explore whether we could come up with some sort of a program that would be fair and reasonable, that people could understand and kind of opt into it if they want to, and know what it is, as opposed to having to figure out that what they thought was a road is not actually a road. So.
I have a question. No questions?
So anytime that we can get away from the town applying rules and regulations in anything other than an ad hoc manner, I think that's excellent. So I think this is a great idea, to see if we can create a protocol that we can formalize. Because I'm sure that there are a lot of very surprised buyers who learn that they're not living on a public way, and the differences that creates. There are instances where the town specifically refuses to accept certain streets as public ways, such as in Old Village Square. I don't think you plow that, do you?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
No, that was a multifamily development, so it's not even a street.
Yeah, so that,
I think
and
they have a homeowner, like it gets plowed though, right? There's a homeowner
right,
association.
right, but the town, as part of the development process, doesn't want to accept the responsibility for driving or plowing the streets, so they leave that with the developer.
Most of the streets, most of the private ways that are plowed today have been, at one time or another, been petitioned to plow. We do under state legislature that we can plow private ways if they do petition and the town agrees to plow those for emergency situations, and but it's a liability to us also when we go in there, because we don't, like I said, if it's not built to standards, certain things can be damaged, and spending public funds on a private way, whether it was not done intentionally, but then spending that money on that private way is like just doing like someone's driveway, and that's the way we have to think about it, is that even though it looks like a road, acts like a road, it's still a private property. It's someone's property. It's not the town's property at that time. So.
Yeah.
So in general, I think this is an excellent exercise to undertake.
Start with
Sure,
the question
yeah.
there first.
Just get a microphone and just who you are and where you live and all that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barry Jones on Bridlefield Lane. When you create this rubric, is there any room to put in there some kind of tax abatement on an assessment levy for not being able to qualify for all of the services that the town can provide, like road maintenance, plowing, and so forth? Do you get a break as a homeowner in your tax rate?
The short answer is no, right? I mean, if you want the road to be maintained by the town, it's got to be accepted as a public road.
I understand that, but if it's not going to be accepted, we've accepted that it's not going to be accepted. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, so we have accepted that it's not going to happen. Is there any opportunity for a conversation or dialogue about some kind of, I don't mean a rebate, but just a lower levy? We're not getting the full range of services that the rest of the town would be getting.
I think that becomes a difficult argument, because then how do you parse that I mean, there are plenty of people in town that don't have children. Should they not pay for the schools? I don't know how you'd do that. I think what happens is that when Bridlefield was built, the price of the housing included some sort of probably reduction for the fact that the road wasn't built out to town standards.
Hi, Steve Crookshank, Hawthorne, I guess representing a few people here. You're more than welcome to speak, of course, too. So first of all, thank you for putting together a structure for it, because I think that has been a lot of our frustration, was the ad hoc nature of how do we get this done. I know it's come up at a lot of our association meetings before, and sort of the comments were, well, you have to know the right guy and catch him at the right moment, and then maybe you can get your lot considered. And that's just not the way we should work, frankly. So I don't know if, Sarah, if you've already received our request or not, but if you haven't, I'm sure you will be getting one. We would
I actually heard from other people. I looked back through my email about Hawthorne. I remember in 2014.
Yep, sounds about right.
I saw the email from 2014, and I am not a lawyer, so I can say, you can petition the town. I think the selectmen are on the right track by developing a smoother process for understanding how to petition the town and what the, what the standard might be. But, at the very end of the day, there's engineering and legal work that is required that associations and private property owners will have to seek. I don't know that there's anybody in town hall that could provide those types of that type of advice on an individual basis.
So just from an informal standpoint, if you speaking about road widths and maintainability, the Alcott and Walden roads are certainly wider than Curve Street, where Jerry lives, certainly wider than Summer Street, which is also a public way. I'm sure there are many other technical aspects to it, but I can't see a problem with plowing in those areas. And I know that we have, 27 households? 29. So if we think about the 27 years that those houses have been on the market and paying taxes, that's probably well over $10 million worth of taxes. And all we're looking for really is just to get those 2 streets plowed. That's basically all we're looking for. So if you could add them to your list of private ways that get plowed, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, we have 2 folks on the Zoom. Do you want to?
No, let me get these questions first, and then
Yeah.
I do have questions.
So can we promote first JDH, and then we'll promote Alex Green? JDH, you say who you are and where you live, please?
Oops, there you go. I'm Jane Harity. I live on Walden Court in the Hawthorne area. I wanted to second what Steve Cruikshank said and take it a little further, saying, you know, it's not just a matter of plowing, but it is also road maintenance and sidewalk maintenance. And to Steve's point about, you know, the ease of plowing or the ease of maintenance, I would offer up the comparison of Pine Street, which is certainly more hazardous and more narrow than our roads. We have a nice, easy turnaround. Our plows are able to do it readily. I would think that the town plows would be able to. And I would also note that I see several people who are originals in this neighborhood, including myself, at the meeting there in person. We were clearly given by the developer, not just the impression, but more almost a promise, and I don't have anything in writing, to say, hey, this is just a formality. You folks are a private street now, but, it's just a matter of signing a piece of paper and you folks will be a public street. 26 years later, we're still stuck. And I don't think any of us really knows why we can't be public.
Thank you. All right. You want to promote Alex Green, please?
Should be joining now.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, my name is Alex Green, and I live on Rhododendron. And part of the issue with our road is that it's not even paved, and so the entire thing gets riddled with potholes, and it is tough to track down. It really is. And we were told that we would have to pave the road as the residents for it to get accepted by the town, which is a whole other sort of issue, again, where we don't have any housing association or HOA or anything of that nature. And so it makes it a little bit challenging. And so, the town does plow it. There is a turnaround at the end of the road, and it may not meet some of the width specifications or some of the other specs that you have laid out, but it makes it kind of challenging when, the residents are going to have to, or have been told to incur the cost. So similar to like the gentleman mentioned about plowing, is there some type of tax, levy or whatever? It would seem like that would be a helpful way for these, tax-paying residents to get a drivable road.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the issue is, for me, when I think about it just conceptually, there's sort of the technical piece of it, is that if you're getting something that you're not currently entitled to, it should kind of be a shared thing, right? When people get sewer hookups they didn't have before, typically they'll pay a betterment for the sewer hookup and it gets paid off over time. And so I would say my bias is toward wanting to reduce the number of private ways we have, because I do think it is, it's not great to have, it'd be better if we're maintaining them, but to ask sort of the general taxpayers to foot all of the bill of bringing roads that we're not currently responsible for maintaining up to code to bring it in, I don't think that's fair either. So, I mean, as I think about this conceptually, if we came up with some sort of a program, I think it would ultimately be kind of a shared situation, right? Where we'd expect that people who are asking to have a road that either does not qualify, would not otherwise qualify as a public road to be accepted, would contribute something towards it depending on the circumstances of that particular road. Then going forward, it would be maintained, right? So you'd kind of have the initial buy-in cost to get it upgraded and get it close enough, because a lot of them I think probably can't meet it just based on how wide they are, but close enough that there's not a safety issue, and then going forward the town would pick it up. And I think when I think about it conceptually, that to me would be the fairest way to do it, both for the people on the streets and the people for the town generally. And just recognizing that we don't have any excess funds for this. I mean, this is a fairly expensive project. We get about $390,000 a year from the state for Chapter 90 for all the roads in town.
That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is Chapter 90. Our roadway funding, we have a pavement management program that we plan ahead for all of our roadways in town, trying to keep all the roadways in good shape. When we look at subdivisions, whether it's unaccepted to accepted or private to accepted, depending on the condition of the road, I mean, you could have a road that's been there for 20 years and all the pavement looks good, but that useful life of that pavement is already gone. And so if there's not a new pavement or new improvements to that subdivision, that has to be put onto the improvement list right away rather than 15 or 20 years when a new subdivision was supposed to be accepted. So that puts a lot of pressure, more pressure on us. And we were trying to do, like I said, we're trying to make a program that helps these private roads, but with an understanding that we get $5,300 a year per mile, which doesn't take care of maybe just it's a $5,000 for a handicapped access ramp. So that gives you an idea of how much it covers for the subdivision. So to get that cost right away, you know, taking a subdivision over or taking a street over, that cost has to be put into a plan right away, and that pushes everything back in our pavement management program. So that's one of the challenges we face as well. So.
Hi, I'm Jody Melvin. I live on Walden Court. These are my neighbors as well. Yeah, and thank you for bringing attention to this. I think it's a really good idea to put a program together, to put some kind of structure together. I've lived there since I was one of the original settlers. I've been there since 1995, and saw everything come in. And I just want to say that our cul-de-sacs, Walden Court and Alcott Way, and I was going to say it before everybody else said that, there are pieces of Pine Street that are narrower than our cul-de-sacs. And we do have fire hydrants. And oh, by the way, there was a fire in my house about 10 years ago, and 2 full-size fire engines did come up, as well as an EMT truck. So I feel, and also if you were to look at the pavement, comparing Hawthorne to the cul-de-sacs, I think you'll find they're pretty equal. And we also took the opportunity as our association, we did a lot of seal coating, cracking, whatever you call it, a few years ago. So we have been trying to keep it up. So I think if you went up there, you'd find that surprisingly, it's probably better than what you think it is.
All right, Gus, you were, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
Sure. Bain Gill, I'm also a Hawthorne Village resident, and like Jody, we've been there since the beginning. And one thing I would maybe point out to Mo is that there was a ton of ledge in that development when it was brought on. So there was literally a quarry up there, and the quality of the roads that were built, I think, is quite high. I don't think you've had to do much to the main road since you took it. Well, you've had it since the beginning, and so the side roads, which are not cul-de-sacs, they're loop roads, but those are very high quality roads. So any maintenance that you've had to do on the main road.
You have to look at the useful life of the roadway. I mean,
sure.
As far as the pavement, if it was done 20 years ago, even though looks in good shape, that could break up over a winter. And I'm not saying it will be, but we have to look at it that way. When we pave, like we just paved West Street, we're hoping to get 20 years out of that road. We just paved it this year. In 20 years, if we don't do anything to it, and I'm glad you did some crack filling and things like that to help preserve the road, but that's a sign of it being deteriorating and that we would need to go in there soon to redo that road unless it falls apart. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is having our resources having to go into subdivisions. That's why we try to keep our roadways, the good roads, good, and keep working on different places, subdivisions, main roads, to keep the quality of that pavement. So with our pavement management program, we have different methodologies that we use. So I'm not saying that your road isn't in good shape, but the quality of life, the useful life of that pavement isn't long if it was paved back 20 years, 25 years ago. That's all.
Yeah, couple questions. First one, for new developments right now that might have private, the issue of private ways where a developer has a private way, but once the development's completed, then the streets get handed over to the town. So it starts private way and automatically goes over.
So certain roads are private in perpetuity. So
right.
What happens is someone wants to fit maybe extra lots in there for relatives, friends, things like that. That's happened over the years. And so they ask for waivers to make the road smaller, the lot smaller, no curbing, whatever the case may be. But as new people move in, that kind of goes away. And like you say, you paid taxes, and you'd like to see
what kind of goes away?
It goes away that it was supposed to be private in perpetuity, because the new homeowners may not realize that it's private, or don't have the homeowners association to take care of any maintenance that goes on.
So I'm going to jump in here for all of it. I actually have friends in some of these neighborhoods, so I know some of you I know, and some of them that aren't here I know. So I'm going to play hard nose here. Why is that the town's problem?
It's not the town's problem.
Okay, that's a start. So we start. So what I'm getting at is there can be lots of homeowners can find out lots of different things. We can go up to Trail End and we can hear homeowners that said, "I had no idea that the Westwood Gun Club is going to be as noisy as it is. Nobody told me." And so what I'm getting at is I'm looking at a broad category.
You could say buyer beware.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. So that's a starting point here.
Right.
But my first question was actually geared toward, is this issue that we're dealing with an issue of dealing with private ways that have existed in town for a long time, and we now have procedures that if a developer has a private way, they might have a private, I'm thinking of like Hinckley South, might be a private way while the development is underway, but Hinckley South is building streets, I believe, that would be conforming with the standards for the town. So at the point that the development is done, then the developer hands over the streets to the town. So it's not a problem going forward, or is it? That's my first question.
It depends on the waivers that are given to the private ways. I think, there's a difference between unaccepted roadways and private ways. Unaccepted roadways are roads that are supposed to turn into public ways.
So if I'm a developer...
I would just say, just on this, because this is a good point. I think there's a period historically after which we started doing a better job of only accepting as private ways that were up to our standard that we could accept as public roads, or where you had a homeowners association or some institutional mechanism for maintenance. I think most of what we're talking about here are very old roads, and then in the borderline there. I think the risk is you don't want to create a program that then provides a loophole for going forward to sort of cut corners, knowing, well, I'll just cut corners, and then eventually the homeowners will be able to get in. Like, there's got to be some cutoff where, after this point in time, we're all aware of this problem. We had this kind of long period of time of ad hocery about this. And so that's part of what I said as part of a program, is to say, look, there's a cutoff. This is not going to work for any road built after some year, because everybody should know better
Okay, so
at that
that's
point. But for the stuff that's truly older, before, I don't know what falls in where, but for the older stuff, that's what we're trying to get at.
Okay, so that's my first question is, it's a lot easier for me to swallow something like this if it's bounded, as opposed to it's just a technique that developers can use. Next question, so if a developer sits there and pursues a waiver, just to keep it easy, let's say it's a waiver around curbs. When the private way that has the waiver around curbs wants to basically be handed over as a public way for the town, the highway department has a problem with the lack, or whatever these curbs would be, has a problem. Does the private way get brought into meeting the standards, or are we actually talking about, no, we're just it's a private way, it had waivers, it doesn't meet the standards, but the town just kind of says, well, but on this one, we'll just take on all the risk?
My view is that it shouldn't be accepted in the substandard standards that are being allowed for private ways.
Okay.
With that being said, it doesn't mean that if we're looking for a 22-foot paved surface, 11-foot travel lanes, if it comes in at 20, that's not a reason to say, hey, you got to make it 2 feet wider.
So are there are there some standards, like I get that,
Right.
if you went up to Alcott, I get why you probably don't need 11-foot travel lanes if you don't have them, although you might, I'm not sure about it there. So are there some standards that would be understandably waivable, because it's like there's only the people that live on the street?
I think that's a conversation we need to have and need to discuss of what standards are acceptable to waive or to reduce with the Planning and Zoning Board as well. I think, it's a conversation that has not happened with the private ways. It's understandable that, everyone wants their town accepted so the town maintains the road. It's a tremendous amount of pressure on the town to take these roads over in the conditions that they're in. So some sort of improvements have to be made. I think it has to be a case by case and have to look at it and see what standards we would recommend as a minimums.
Okay, so that leads to my next question. This is the hard-nosed mercenary in me here. So why does the town want to take these over at all? What's the incentive for the town to do this?
I think,
besides common decency or something like that.
it was more of just bringing up a conversation with these private roads because we have so many of them in town, and we've had multiple phone calls from a lot of people to make these accepted roadways. I just want to kind of get the discussion so that we can explain to the townspeople of what we face as a town, on the town government side, what we have to do for funding and what pressures it puts on us, and to understand your point of view as well. So
So to go back to a place like Bridlefield, I think then the answer is, well, you're not giving us a break on our real estate taxes. We're paying taxes as if we had a public way in front of us. We kind of like to see if there's a way we can actually take advantage of some services that maybe we don't have a totally conforming street, but if it's conforming enough.
And if we can't conform, okay, we'll continue taking care of it privately.
Right.
But give us a break.
But don't say that, because I'd jump on that one. It's like, okay, good, we got it.
Give us a break as a taxpayer for that portion of the service that we don't get.
Okay.
At this point, up to this point, the hard truth is that it's considered private property to the town. And that's why it's just like, again, it's like someone's driveway. It's like you consider it a street to come out to the main road. We consider it in our minds as a private driveway. So in our own driveways, we don't plow them. We don't fill potholes in people's private driveways. So that's how we consider that as private property. It's not a town road, so it's not public property yet.
Even with town sewers, because we have town sewers on our.
The sewer, the utilities, that brings up a different point. It is connected to the town, to town sewage. By rights, it should be maintained by the development, but if there's a water main break or some kind of sewer problem, we would not, because it affects our system, we wouldn't just shut the water down and say, you're on your own, go fix it whenever you can, and you're out of water.
Can you explain that sewer thing again? Because we're on sewer as well.
Yep. So if there's an issue.
If our sewer line breaks,
homeowners associations responsible?
By rights, they are responsible for that area. It's not a town, it's not part of the town. It's just like, if you think about it this way, again, I mean, I know it's hard to think about it this way, but if you have a one family home and you have a water and sewer connection to the street, that's privately owned. If you have an issue, it's your responsibility to fix that. So if you think about it the same way, is that if Bridal Field is not a public way, it's private property, it's a common driveway, those mains that are in the road that you consider sewer mains or water mains, to us are services from your private property to the town layout.
So, Mo, there was a situation about a year ago that was like this, and I thought it was off North or something, where a woman was on the verge of selling her property, and the sewer system was private, and it had a hookup to the town, and there was a dispute. I don't even know how it got resolved now, but she got hung up on trying to sell the property.
That's another different thing. That's
not the same.
That was a decision made by prior officials back in the day. I call it BM before Mo, but it's one of those.
Well before Mo.
It was a private sewer system that was allowed to be put into the public way.
Okay.
And so when I was here, I was informed rather quickly when I allowed them to tie into this sewer system that was in the public way, that had no indication that it was private, it had no documentation that I could see, and found out it was a private sewer system. So that's a little bit different than what we're talking about here.
Okay, so, all right, but that actually ties into my last question here is, whether it was a sewer system that was private that wanted to, I guess if you could try to get private ways taken as public roads, you might conceivably be able to get private sewer systems accepted as public sewer systems through some process.
Well, at least the last time that came up, I don't know what their current position is, but I think they would like that.
Correct.
Right.
With the Water and Sewer Board, we're looking at having them making improvements so that the town would accept it.
So my broad question is, and this ties into a comment that came from one of the online speakers.
Yep.
What do we do, whether it's let's leave the sewers out for a minute, but it feels to me like it's a similar category, or could be. What do we do with the private way to assess the condition, like if we're trying to figure out some way to split costs, if that's what we're doing? One piece to me sounds like, well, there might be certain standards that we could waive, and so you don't have to do anything to fix them. And then there are other standards, like maybe substandard or unacceptable curbs that you'd have to fix so that we can actually plow without getting into trouble. What mechanism would you use to assess the wear and tear, the current status of a private way? In other words, when I have a private way, and just before it's time to repave it, say, I think it needs to be a public way, and then all of a sudden you've got that priority project that needs to be done next year because the whole way is about to fall apart. How does that part work?
So in my career, we've done a lot of street inspection reports, a lot of roadway cost estimates. When a subdivision is built, there's a whole laundry list, 3 pages of all the activities that happens to have a subdivision accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So you start with the underground, all the drainage, all the water, sewer, hydrants, gate valves, everything, the layers of pavement. You have the gravel base, you have the binder course, you have the top course. You have the compaction of that system. If it doesn't reach 95% compaction, that creates potholes and it creates sinkholes and things like that. You have granite curbing, you have, unless you have Cape Cod berm with a grass strip, sidewalks, all the rest. So all that gets put in, and as soon as the developer starts to get those activities completed, they put in for a reimbursement for that money. Now, at the end of that process, there's a fee that's held for acceptance. Now, if the developer doesn't accept it at that time, it's still an unaccepted roadway, it's still private. But as a private road, when you get those waivers, they may not have the proper thickness of the roadways or the gravel base or the width or the sidewalks or the curbing or the drainage. You know, it's really important that the water is controlled, stormwater management, especially is a big thing right now. So, you know, in the case of rhododendron, they have a dirt road that's not paved, no drainage, just coming out, everything sheet flowing off into people's properties and then out to Route 27. So every subdivision has to be taken case by case to kind of figure out what needs to be done and maybe a meeting with the planning board to see what type of waivers can be, what's the minimum of the waiver that would be accepted.
So where I'm going with this is I'm wondering whether there's a way, in the same way that I'm trying to figure out how we might do what you're looking to do. If there are some standards that need to be corrected and some standards that can be waived, I get that. Is there a way to assess the life of a road?
Yep.
So I'll make it up. I'll say, well, we can accept a road that's got it's assessed to have at least 10 years of life left in it. But if you got a road that's about to fall apart, and you got to fix the road or bring it up to a certain standard before we'll take it on, can we establish that kind of
So with our pavement management, we do a roadway inventory every 5 years.
Yep.
It does a pavement condition, it does an assessment, and it gives it a roadway surface rating. We could look at it as what roads fall under a certain threshold. We could use that as a standard.
That's what I was looking for. That might be.
Yeah, I think that's got to be a part of it, right? Sort of here's the rule, and it's obviously not going to be perfect, black and white, but it's got to be consistent. So, because right now we have no consistency in this process. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the topic of roads, I guess we're in the interesting situation where Hawthorne is a public way, Walden and Alcott are privates. And so, and they're of the same age, I can't speak to their construction quality, I don't have that information. But hypothetically, right, to ask us to redo Walden and Alcott before Hawthorne gets redone is going to make it far more expensive for us to do that, because it would be far more efficient if they're of the same age and are going to need to be replaced at the same time to do them all at once.
With an understanding with that, if Hawthorne is already in our schedule of repairs and Walden and Alcott is not, that's where the difference becomes then.
Right, but there should
But I
be.
think to that, just conceptually, right?
Yeah, conceptually.
So it'd be that you have to bring it up to code, but it could be, okay, it's 10 years out. If it's 10 years out, here's how much you have to pay to have it accepted, because that's the added cost that 10 years from now, we're going to have to add that in. So I think it could be, you can bring it up, I mean, I think the ideal would be.
Do the whole subdivision at once.
Right, you bring it up and hand it over. Otherwise, it's, okay, you have 10 years left, 10 years, here's the basic metric. You all get together, you contribute that amount, we accept it, it goes on the plan, and that amount of money is effectively held against that cost when it comes down.
Because we were literally talking about this last week.
Yeah.
You know, should we spend, I forget how much the numbers were.
Oh, it's a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
You know, to do these two roads in anticipation that it might help us get accepted.
Right.
And that's
which seems ridiculous to
And
do.
that's another thing too, it does go to town meeting for acceptance. It's not just a vote of the board.
Yeah, but I think that's, well, at least from my mind, conceptually what it would be. That for some of them, if it's essentially at this point a zero, right, you've got to bring it up before or pay in to have the town, it may be cheaper for the town to do it. But still, you've got to contribute to get it to that point. If it's in better shape, it would be less expensive to do. I mean, I think that's the idea, is to try to treat
It would have to
like
be
cases
looked at
and
as a
like.
case by case and inspected and looked at what the conditions are.
The sensitivity I have is that on one hand, you've got all the taxpayers of the town, and then in a particular neighborhood, you may be in a neighborhood, let's say that we never got told that this was how this worked, and so I bought it and it's mine, and I now have a direct financial problem, or collectively we have a financial problem. How do you trade off helping a group of people that have a particular financial issue because of the circumstances, just automatically dumping it onto the taxpayers because it's inconvenience, not a good argument. On the other hand, living there, paying taxes, and having a road that effectively functions as a road that the town hasn't had to maintain, that's the other side. So I'm kind of just trying to figure out where you navigate that.
I mean, the ideal state would be not to have any private ways that don't have an ongoing mechanism for maintaining them. right? And so,
Right.
not to have any private ways that don't have an ongoing mechanism to maintain them. So if you have like Old Village Square, you have it's a condo association, it's going to be existing, it's going to be maintained, like there's a fee and that's covered. For others that don't, which describes most of the ones we're talking about, it'd be better off if these were all public roads, right? I think there is a public interest in limiting the amount of these private ways, but I think what we're wrestling for here is a fair way to allocate the expense of doing that and the risk of doing that between the improvements that will be mainly felt by the people on those roads, and then that public benefit for having more roads, particularly roads that aren't through roads. So I think we'd like to be able to figure out a fair way to get there, and then each group of neighbors can decide if it's worth it to be in this program or not. But at least anybody on a private way could go on the website, identify the fact that their street is a private way, and hopefully see what the program is and decide whether they want to participate in it or not. I think that's what we're trying to get to. And so,
Is there a present process right now to get the road, get the private ways assessed?
No. For the private roads?
Yeah.
No. I mean, it would, like I said, we were trying to develop a process because there is a lot of interest in becoming public ways. So I think we're at the infancy stage of trying to develop something that's fair and equitable for everybody.
Well, we have the standard road acceptance process that we've had forever. And so I don't know if that landed in the Board of Selectmen's packets, but it's typewritten, it's older, it's maybe not that user-friendly. So a step in the right direction would be updating that. But at the very end of the day, I'm thinking, when I first came on this meeting, we were talking about having peer engineers for stormwater review for, Board of Health projects and planning board projects. That's pretty much status quo. We don't have a town engineer. Obviously, you have most expertise, and all those guys at the highway department are really skilled, but they're not engineers, and they don't work necessarily for the homeowners. So I'm envisioning some sort of process where maybe we do some sort of peer engineer, and you can work with the planning board or somehow in lieu of hiring your own engineer, maybe there's some way that we can implement a process that's fair. Because like I said, every road is different, and there's going to be a different metric for each road to measure to.
all right, let me take two last comments from JDH and Alex Green on the Zoom machine, and then we'll call it a wrap on this topic, and there's more work to do.
Get a couple comments,
sorry,
too.
Pete. Hold on, let's do
please do
JDH
them.
and Alex, and then we'll go back to Pete.
Hi, this is Jane Harity again, Walden Court. I just wanted to applaud your interest in sort of putting a process and some understanding to all of this. I do want to point out, Gus, you've taken an approach of, why would we, other than goodwill, fund these people? And if you look at it from the other perspective of us, we're taxpayers. It's not us against you. We're all part of one community. And if you really want to play devil's advocate, we have funded thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in care for our roads, when for 26 years we have actually been asking the town, what is it that we need to do to be approved? And as far as I know, I just don't know what the answer is. And maybe 26 years ago, if you had said, hey, listen, if you do X, Y, Z up front, you'll be approved, and we would have weighed and measured that and said, well, over the next 10 years, that will pay off, and we're going to do those improvements or whatever it takes up front to get these things done and approved. We've never really had an understanding of what we need to do. It's all been very vague. And quite frankly, I feel, having listened to this meeting, like, yes, there's some interest in making some consistency to the process, and I appreciate that. But I do feel like it's an us against them. Why do we want to help them? And I don't understand that. My 5 kids are out of the school system, but I still support the schools. I don't have elderly people in town, but I still support the COA. And that's how it's meant to be in my world. And so I don't think it should be, make them prove to us why they belong, why as taxpaying citizens, they should get the same value that everybody else gets, or most people.
So if I can, I'll respond. Jane, first off, just to be clear, I was deliberately being a devil's advocate, and I was deliberately asking hard questions, so don't take my questions as my firm position on this. But to answer your question specifically, there's two reasons why the question is a worthwhile question. Now, the answer is a different issue. The first one is the moral hazard of an individual property owner not knowing about some condition in their property does not automatically fall to the taxpayers of a town to cover. So there's a piece of it was behind my question is the fact that you didn't bother to know about something about your property when you bought it is not the responsibility of the town to insulate you from that. That was what was behind that piece. The second piece was if we have a private way which is a non-conforming street that had waivers that effectively worked to the advantage of a developer who was able to extract greater economic return because that waiver allowed, whether it was, I think Sarah mentioned improvements in the FAR or different cheaper, berms or anything around, somebody made money on that, and now all of a sudden we're saying, well, the taxpayers should make up for that. So I'm not using that as my position. I'm trying to explain why I asked the question, because I think that is what you have to kind of trade off is how much of this is reasonably just put on the taxpayers' shoulders. And it's not so much it's us versus them, it's a matter of who's actually holding the bag on this and who should pick it up. So that was what was behind the questions. I deliberately asked them as aggressive questions.
All right, let's hear from Alex Green, and then we will call a wrap on this one. And then Pete. And then Pete, before we call a wrap on this one.
Hi, Alex Green from Rhododendron, and I just want to second the point that the woman was making about we're taxpayers, and what about the residents that don't have kids? Everyone still pays for schools. It feels as if it should be the same for the roads. And then my thought in regards to, you're right, the developer who originally did this made money, or perhaps by getting these waivers. But that developer is now long gone, and the current residents are sort of stuck with that. And we don't know what the town or what the benefit was at that time, but so it seems like it was a town standard perhaps that wasn't the right standard to have in place for that road at the time. And so having the plan that you proposed for getting acceptance going forward seems to make sense, but what about the existing roads where that developer is already gone? And, again, some residents don't have HOAs. In my opinion, that the roads should be accepted that are here, and new developments would then be subject to the, the plan that you're trying to put in place.
Right. No, I think you've articulated the issue that we're trying to resolve, and I think everybody would like to get this without paying anything for it. I think that's generally true, and I think the issue we have is we don't have enough money to do this for every private way in town without throwing off our other maintenance plans. So we're trying to navigate. If we had tons of money to do this, we could do it. We don't. And so we're trying to figure out a fair way to do it given our limited resources. Pete.
So I think with respect to the equity issue, that we might get some guidance from the way the town did the sewage in town, and we ran sewers. There were a lot of houses that were having septic systems that were failing, and so that we extended the sewers to help those people out. The town had permitted sewers that then failed, and so that the town felt like it was complicit, I think. So that's just one thought, that we might look to that as a way to do this. The second thing that I was just from my own personal experience, 32 years ago, I moved onto a private way. Didn't know it. I came from Newton. Everything is a public way. And our developer sold all the 11 lots and moved to Florida. And then I asked the question, how do we get accepted as a public way? And I discovered that there was a process and you have to go through it. But in those days, the town wasn't following up. Our subdivision had met all the planning board guidelines for subdivision roads, but our developer was gone. There was no one interested in making it a public way except me and my neighbors, and so that we did it, or I did it. So that's another example. I think it's very different now that Sarah's our town planner, and so that I'm sure that that's getting factored in and followed up on now. And then the other experience that I had personally was our neighbor in Street, Clayton, was also built to planning board standards, but before it got accepted as a public way, it had a sinkhole in it. And there was some sort of negotiation that the town entered into with the neighbors. I don't even know what the details of it was, but I think the neighbors had to do something to get it up to town standards and get accepted as a public way. So that's all.
Thank you, Pete. All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Oh, I had one more thing.
Sorry.
I actually sat on the ZBA when Hawthorne was approved, and I had wanted to require the developer to put up an endowment to fix the water pump station. When you turn into Hawthorne, on the right, there's the water pump station. And my mind was going to the idea that, well, that's not going to last forever. Why don't we have him create some endowment so that when it breaks, the town doesn't have to pay to fix it? Has that broken? Because I was prevented from doing that.
No idea. We hear it running, but I have no idea.
Oh, so it's still working then?
We're
maintain
the next house up from that. So I do see town trucks.
So I'm very interested in that water pump station, so let me know if it breaks.
But
We maintain.
We did give to the town land, conservation land, in order to get the cluster zoning that we have the 29 homes on. So we did give the town land, and we did have easements for Medfield people, public ways.
Yeah, and I think Bridlefield.
Right off of the private roads that we have to maintain. So it's kind of, we have given all these years.
Yeah, it's a wonderful solution to things, and the houses are a little closer together because of that land. I think that Sarah was telling us earlier that there have been only 4 of these cluster developments that have been built in Medfield, so that it's a great idea, but it's just it was not used much, unfortunately.
And we have asked over the years, there's been different trustees for Hawthorne that have taken this up over time. I know I tried getting in touch with you a while ago.
Did I not answer you?
Things happen, the pandemic, so I know the last few years have been crazy, but even before I became a trustee, we had Jeff Hutchins, we had
A lot of
different people trying, but, kind of getting to a point, and then it just stopped, and then the next trustees come in, it just stops, and now we're ready, we're getting frustrated a little bit,
Right.
We'd love to work something out, so I guess maybe we're done with it tonight, but we could all meet another time soon and make a solution, and I think every situation is slightly different. Like you said, your 10th years left of the road, we started asking for this to become part of a public way. The roads were perfect, and now they're in the same condition as Hawthorne, because nothing's been done to Hawthorne either, and
Great.
When we do the sewers, what percentage do we expect the residents to pay versus the town? Isn't it something like 95.5 or 90?
I'm not sure what the betterments, what were the betterments?
Yeah,
that was-
it depended on the finance structure of it. I'd have to go back and look, but different streets had different percentage structure on that.
If I could ask one more question on Hawthorne, to the point about, well, it would make sense to update the circles in sync with Hawthorne. If, between whatever time that happens and now, is the issue really only snow plowing? What is the actual practical impact of?
Well, I don't think we're super concerned about the
condition of the roads. They're
Yeah.
in good shape, and we have looked after them, but
Right.
I'd say the plowing, there are curbs, so the curbs are there,
Mhm.
and,
What I'm trying to understand is if there was some sort of thing that says, oh, it all comes over when it all gets synced up, or if that was an answer, I don't even know if that's a good answer, but if that won't happen for 10 years because we're not redoing Hawthorne, as a practical matter in terms of what you'd be looking for, is it really just snowplow?
So, right now, we don't know because we don't know where Hawthorne sits on the priority
Right.
list.
Right, right.
Just to let you know, it's not programmed into the next few years. I'll give you that right now.
So between now and whenever that happens, are we really, is the real practical issue snowplowing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's big. Sidewalk maintenance is how much?
you guys just did the sidewalks on
They just did
Hawthorne,
Hawthorne sidewalks.
but the sidewalks on the loop roads
Mhm.
too, so.
I was just trying to get a sense of what is the real issue immediate, the ongoing issue.
If they were accepted roadways, it would make sense to mobilize for the whole subdivision at the same time.
Right.
Because of what we're trying to do here, it's all about the timing and what we can develop as a matrix for this and see what can be done.
All right, thank you. All right, Mo, next we have request to us to approve a contract with environmental partners for monitoring services at the former landfill.
So this is our annual contract for landfill monitoring. It's for groundwater and surface water, landfill gas monitoring, for quarterly reports. It's what we've had for many years since the landfill had closed, so.
Does this do anything is this anything other than just routine compliance monitoring?
It's
It's not,
routine
it's not
compliance.
setting us up to get
Not yet.
closer to being able to do anything?
Not yet, no.
It's on our list.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Any questions, Pete?
No.
Yes.
All right, I move that we approve the contract with environmental partners for monitoring services at the former landfill in the amount of $36,500.
Second?
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye, opposed? All right, next. Thank you very much, Mo.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mo.
To discuss Medfield State Hospital dog activity and dog walking. So Christine, do you want to set us up here? I know we've all gotten,
So you've received an email that there's been increasing issues at the state hospital. We've been talking probably about 2.5 years now about, we were concerned about the number of dogs that were at the hospital. And then you received an email from a woman who had suffered a dog bite at the hospital and been knocked down. I think you've received actually several emails of similar concerns. So we thought it was important to talk tonight about where we're headed in terms of what we're going to do for dogs at the state hospital. I know you got bit too.
The dog tried to bite me, but he only got my shorts, fortunately, so.
I knew you were a selectman.
you're just so fast, Pete. I mean,
I was not that fast. I'm not anymore. It's just become, there's so many dogs, and people are getting jumped all over all the time. And, I mean, the woman who sent the email to us from Longmeadow said that she just won't go there anymore, unfortunately. And I think that there are a lot of people in town that feel that way, that it's not a safe place anymore because of the dogs they're supposed to be on the leash inside the quad, but nobody does that, or very
Well,
few
it's hard
people do that.
it's very hard for us to enforce that because that's not the actual bylaw.
Right.
So it's hard to have the animal control officer or the police department to enforce that because the bylaw actually states they can be on leash or within voice command. That's part of the
So
issue.
I think we need a new bylaw as well, as some sort of maybe new rule for the hospital. But somebody, I think, needs to sort of figure out what's the best way to go forward up there.
So I have a dog. Actually, you stayed with us yesterday afternoon for a while, very chill. And to you just made a comment about dogs if they come to recall. So I think it's unfortunate there are a few dog owners that think they have a great dog, and unfortunately it is that dog that jumps and doesn't control. But I just walked up the other day with about 6 friends. There were about 8 dogs, all very chill. Everyone just walked along. There was no issue. So I hate to think that we're going to take a couple of bad apples and make this strict law when that is a very open area where it's just nice, especially everything we went through with COVID. It's a great place to go walk. And, you know, I'm going to make a really bad analogy right now, but this is where it's like, okay, I don't want to pick and choose what we try to find people on. If we left here right now and we walk down Pleasant, because I walk down Pleasant with my dog all the time, people park on the sidewalks. They don't park in the street. You walk around cars that are parked on the sidewalks. And there's never a ticket. And there's cars that are parked the wrong direction. And I know when I took driver's ed, you park where the flow of the traffic's going. They don't do that. And I get it's a tight street and people need to park. I get it, but we don't flag for that. I would hate to see that we're going to flag people or find people for people that have dogs that can go on a nice walk up there and they're not bothering anybody. And it's a few bad apples that are now going to try to change the law for everybody or change the fees. I just would say that would not be a great idea.
Well, the current bylaw is leash or voice command.
Voice command.
Right.
And it's
So the question.
only in the area where the buildings are, but if you go back into the big loop that goes close to the trails, you don't have to have.
Let's not even-
That was a change that we made in the spring.
That's a sign, not really a bylaw. We put up a sign, but.
Put up about 4 signs.
It also says no overnight parking in that lot, but.
Yeah, that's why I kind of like, it's like, okay, we're going to do something.
You park up there?
Says you have to have a leash if you're in the quad, basically, right? Yeah.
And that was a result last spring, I think it was, of the women. There's a group of women in their 60s and 70s that like to go up and walk the quad. And this one report came in that said, gee, I think she was actually a 70-year-old woman. Dog wasn't even attacking her. The dog just jumped up and jumped on her and knocked her over. But if any of you have elderly parents, you know how bad that can get if someone gets pushed over onto concrete. And the idea, the issue with the hospital is, to your point, that's great. It's great for dogs, but there's actually people we're getting reports from now that are saying, including this most recent one, that says, you know, I just don't feel comfortable with the dogs, so I like to go walk a couple miles a day up there. I love it up there. But I'm not comfortable going there anymore. So in other words, we're, without really intending to, in order to make sure dogs have access to the hospital, we actually are driving real people out because they don't know, they're not prepared to deal with dogs off leash. And in this particular case, when I talked to her, I tried to say, well, do you do 10 loops around the campus? And she said, well, no, I actually like to go out and do a 2-mile loop on the trail. And it's like, well, that gets harder. To patrol, to control, all of it gets harder. But I think, from my part, we're trying to find some balance. Pete, you said that I don't know that there's an increasing amount that would be noticeable. Actually, these incidents, as far as I can tell, are fairly rare, but that doesn't negate their importance. At least the cars on Pleasant Street don't come out and run you over.
But
So
you have
it's-
to walk
it's-
around them. So if you don't want to walk on somebody's private, like, if a resident calls because somebody's walking on their lawn, that's trespassing. So to not walk on somebody's lawn, you're then walking on Pleasant Street.
Yeah, my point is that the whole severity of that is completely different than a dog who knocks a 70-year-old woman down on a concrete walk, or drives someone else and just says, well, I don't use the hospital because they don't control anything and people don't control their dogs and I'm not comfortable being out there. So
I would contest that it's rare. I think it's very common. In my experience being up there, that I get jumped on by dogs all the time when I'm there, certainly, and people are just...
You have to keep those puppy biscuits out of your pockets.
Yeah, I got to stop carrying hamburger, obviously.
When are you up there? I go up there periodically, and every time I check, nothing's going on. The only time I ever have had an incident with a dog was the cleanup day we had 3 years ago, and it was because I was coming out of some bushes on the edge of the front of the building, and this guy had one dog on a leash and the other dog was loose, and that dog, because I was kind of emerging through the bushes, just barked at me, and then saw I had boots on and decided it'd stay out of range of my feet. But
well, I can tell you my personal experience was from running up there on weekends, and almost every weekend I would run, I would be running and a dog would come running at me. My reaction to that is I don't know what you're going to do, so I stop and then see what the dogs are going to do. As I say, one of the dogs just went ahead and tried to bite me.
Okay.
At minimum, it's interfering with your time, right?
Oh, yeah. It
Personal
was,
best is harder to achieve if you stop for
Yeah,
dogs. True.
and
Yeah.
clearly we had the incident, well, we didn't have it, Dover had it, but the girl who I think was the captain of their cross-country team that got bitten by 2 dogs, she was out running over on their land, got bitten, and because the owners didn't take responsibility, they never found the dog, so she had to go through a rabies series. She missed meets, she missed all sorts of stuff. So, it's tricky. I don't know how. I don't see those incidents
I can relate
very
another.
often, but nonetheless, we're getting reports of serious incidents that can't.
That was in Hospital Hill.
It wasn't Hospital Hill. It was, if you go out in the back of the hospital and you actually get over to the Dover side, it was over there. She was running one of the trails because she was a cross-country runner.
I think the common theme is running. You need to slow down a little bit. The dog's expecting you to play. But
Instead of regulating the dogs, we'll ban running at the
I
hospital.
think the email lady
you have
was
to
a
take
runner.
the snake out of the back of your pocket when you're running. Anyway, so I mean, I walk at Wheelock. I just did a fun calculation. I've probably walked 4,100 times down there. I mean, I've been down there for almost 10 years now, walking dogs. And I've seen, I've seen dogs get tagged by other dogs on occasion. I've seen my neighbor got taken out on an ambulance because a running dog hit her in the knee and blew out her ACL and some other stuff in her knee. I mean, things happen, I mean, like, things happen driving a car. Things happen, it really, I have to say that in all my experience in seeing hundreds of dogs down there over the years, there is a level of self-policing that goes on with the dog walkers. I mean, we've had a couple of bad apples down in that area with really just out-of-control dogs who had no business being down there. And they were fundamentally shamed out of the, out of the air, and they disappeared. I mean, they just did not walk their dogs anymore. I think there's some sort of community among the people who do walk the dogs. And I know, I mean, no dog, I don't care how good or how do you think they're under voice command? I mean, I watched deer bound across Wheelock at one time, and all these dogs that supposedly always came with voice command were like, that's fun. And they were off and running after the deer.
Yeah, I think the hospital's a little different. The ones I work, no, but they're like this group of ladies, the one that got knocked down, they're in the quad. They just walk around the quad. So it's not like they're out bushwhacking somewhere. And personally, I think it's a shame if we let circumstances come where someone who's at that age, who has the energy and the discipline to go do that, and we just kind of say, well, things happen.
I'll say too, is I've seen dogs on leash who are walking past other people who will jump up on other people. I've seen people go, well, if my dog has to be on a leash, here's a 40-foot leash. And I've seen those leashes swipe people and take their legs out. Again, it really to me, that with everything you try to put in place, it helps, but it also, it does and doesn't, and,
But does Rocky Woods have the same problem? I don't think so.
Rocky Woods is also.
I
know, that's why I'm asking the question. Yeah.
With my dog.
Yep.
Yeah. And I can tell you.
Just get the microphone so the folks at home can hear this.
For the record, I'm speaking way too much tonight. Steve Cruikshank from Hawthorne.
Any longer, we're putting you on a committee.
So, I've been going into Rocky Woods with dogs for 25 years now. More? 30? Since we got here in '94. I've had exactly 2 problems, right? And both of those times were because it was the same guy, and he clearly hated dogs and was threatening to my dog. Other than that, no problems. Thousands of times in there.
So Pete, you had at one time when we talked about this before, but talked about possibly having people have to simply register in order to have dogs there, literally, because we don't have the bylaw, we don't have the manpower, people power, whatever power to enforce the rules. So you can impose the rules, but nobody can just spend all the time up there. My thought is, accountability is the way to get there. One possibility for accountability would be kind of like what Rocky Woods does. If you want to bring your dog up there, you got to register. Or the other thought for accountability was to have a public reporting, like literally a place where public reports can be made with clear instructions and a basic rule that says if you're in an incident with someone else, if either person wants the report, you have to provide your name, your address, so suddenly people realize they'll be held accountable for it.
Dog officer's going to want it anyways.
So
that'd be an initial great step. That's great.
Or even having time schedules, like this time is for dog walking.
That might work,
This time is for no dogs allowed.
Right.
Like you have the pools, like seniors or adults
Right.
swim at for this hour and kids have the rest.
I was thinking of south of Hospital Road for dogs, but it's like, where do you send the walkers, where do you send the dogs? Everybody wants to be north of Hospital Road for the trails.
Times, 11 to 1, 2, just people.
We just don't have the ability to enforce that.
Right.
Right.
What we have.
But if you have the signs and then people, like you said, will be like, oh, excuse me, this is just for, dog walking, but this is people only, just a thought.
So one suggestion, you mentioned Rocky Woods. The way that they do it is they have on-leash zones and off-leash zones.
Right.
And they're signed.
Right.
You go this way, you got to put your dog on a leash.
Mm-hmm.
You go this way, you can let him off the leash.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could do that up at Hospital Hill. Keep the quad, okay, you got to be on the leash in the quads.
That's where we are now.
Right.
Yeah.
Way back in the fields, okay, you can
Yep.
let him off the leash there.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think that the town might want to look into is how to deal with the large number of dog walkers, professional dog walkers that are using the site too. I know that some of them have been reported as being very rude to
Well,
other people.
Part of my thought on the professional dog walkers, if people had to register with a name and the name of their dog, then it would, professional dog walkers, they have different dogs all the time, it would, without kicking them out exactly, would probably kick a lot.
I think on the number of dogs that they can have at any one time. I thought there was like a 7 or 8 kind of thing where they can't exceed that.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
I think there's some number somewhere or something that they can't exceed that, what's considered reasonable under control. 20 dogs, I'm sorry.
And just as a contrast, from my perspective at least, the group that runs VizWiz, whenever those Vislas are up there, those folks, as far as I can tell, are totally responsible. Their dogs are nice, they're athletic, but I part of what's influenced my thinking is I would hate to have that group not be able to take advantage of it. It's just that I don't want to have people that are just up there for exercise not be able to use it because we're being too lax. Okay.
Christine, anything else you need?
Nope.
So what?
We'll start working on some recommendations for the annual town meeting.
Chief Goretta, when this first came up, I owed her a call, and with what's gone on in the last 2 weeks, I haven't been able to, so if you've had talks with her, I think she had some viewpoints.
She has some
Okay.
recommendations.
Okay.
Nick's had some suggestions about how we can deal with it at the annual town meeting.
Okay, great. Okay.
All right, next.
You're good too. Yeah, good.
I'll be in touch about that committee.
Vote to accept a grant in the amount of $25,000 in technical assistance from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Downtown Initiative to support a wayfinding study and design for the downtown area and authorize town administrator to sign the standard state grant contracts.
My question is, what is wayfinding? Is that signs, Sarah?
That is signage, and that was also in our rapid recovery plan when they presented for the downtown area.
Okay, thank you. Let's get one for Park Street businesses.
Any questions, Gus?
Done.
Motion.
Okay, I move that we accept a grant in the amount of $25,000 in technical assistance from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Downtown Initiative to support a wayfinding study and design for the downtown area and authorize Town Administrator Christine Trierweiler to sign the standard state grant contract documents.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? All right, next, vote to approve a contract with McKechnie Associates for fall cleanup services at the Medfield State Hospital. Any questions, Pete?
23,600 is it, I think?
500. 23.5.
Gus, questions?
No questions.
Motion.
I move that we approve a contract with McKechnie Associates for fall cleanup services at the Medfield State Hospital in the amount of $23,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. And by the way, and then there was one. It all comes back to Bill. Next, we have a vote to authorize me to sign a mutual aid agreement for joint fire rescue and/or ambulance service with the town of Sherburne.
So just a little background on this. Obviously, we have mutual aid agreements with our surrounding towns. It was recently discovered by the fire chief in Sherburne and the fire chief in Medfield that that document did not exist between
Really?
Medfield and Sherburne. So we have honored it, obviously, and are continuing to honor it, but we're going to put the formal document in place.
Motion.
I move that we authorize the chair to sign a mutual aid agreement for joint fire rescue and/or ambulance service with the town of Sherburne.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right, next, vote to authorize Town Administrator Christine Trueiler to approve and sign a license agreement with TCS US Productions 9, Inc. for the use of Medfield State Hospital campus and buildings for filming.
Have you by any chance heard back from Todd?
Yes, I think we're...
You talked to Todd?
I had spoken to Todd, and I had reached out to Epsilon, who the town had contracted with to look at the broader tax credit implications, and just notified them that this work, there would be limited work taking place inside buildings, and they said that they
We're good.
They were not
That was another call that I didn't get to make over the last 2 weeks. Okay.
What are the details?
I can't disclose all of the details yet. I can tell you the production company, and they will be filming for 3 days in January, but they're going to need to prep the site from most of the month of December.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of prep.
And they're going to pay us.
And they're paying us, yes.
And can you disclose how much they're paying us?
Not yet.
I
Not
heard the
yet.
word remediation in there
Yeah,
somewhere.
close.
All right, motion.
Okay, I move that we authorize the town administrator, Christine Trueiler, to approve and sign a license agreement with TCS US Productions 9, Inc. for the use of the Medfield State Hospital campus and buildings for filming.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, vote to approve a parade permit for the Medfield Employers and Merchants Organization, Inc., for the annual holiday parade, scheduled for Saturday, December 4th, 2021 at 1 p.m., a parade which we have been invited to lead,
Yes.
along with any other former selectmen who would like to join.
Do we have any festive holiday uniforms that we could all...
We're a little out of practice. We haven't
know.
had this in a bit, so. Do we have a motion, Gus?
I move that we approve a parade permit for the Medfield Employers and Merchants Organization, Inc., for the annual holiday parade scheduled for Saturday, December 4th, 2021 at 1 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next, board and committee appointments. Board of Water and Sewerage. When it rains, it pours. We've had a vacancy on this board since July, and now we have two outstanding candidates who have expressed an interest in joining the board. And I'm very grateful to David Pucci and Claire Meehan for stepping up. The request is to appoint Claire to replace Randy Carg, which I think the term would run through 2024. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
So
Yep, he just finished in July.
this would be the term ending in 2024, and then Dave Pucci as an associate member. We have an heir and a spare, and both will, I think, make a lot of valuable contributions as well. I see Dave. Dave, thank you for joining us in Zoom world, if you're actually still listening to this. Any questions, comments, discussion from anybody?
Nope.
Pete?
My only comment is that we're a very lucky town to have people who are so willing to volunteer, actually file resumes with us to convince us that they meet our exacting standards to work on behalf of the town like this. And as I read these two resumes, it's not the first time I've felt that way, but once again, I've sat there and said, wow, we've got some really great people that are willing to step forward. So thanks to both.
And I think, of all the boards to which we appoint people, this might be the most important.
This is, yes, it needs that technical.
Yeah.
Now that we've got the Board of Health covered.
Right. Well, yeah, the Board of Health as well. As it turned out, yeah, I think that's right. The Board of Health and the Board, it's a good point, guys.
Yeah.
But those two boards, the Board of Health and the Board of Water and Sewerage, are probably the two most important ones. No disrespect meant to any other committees, but overseeing the water system is really important. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're grateful to have two qualified people stepping up to join the two qualified people we already have on the board. So I want to start with a motion to appoint Claire Meehan as a full voting member of this.
I move that we appoint Claire Meehan as a voting member of the Board of Water and Sewerage.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right, and now Dave Pucci.
And I move that we appoint David Pucci as an associate member on the Board of Water and Sewerage.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Great, thank you, that's great. All right, next, consent agenda, 4 items on the consent agenda. The Medfield Lions request permission to post signs for the Christmas tree sales at St. Edward the Confessor Church. Does not have dates on that. Do you know what dates they want those signs up there, the Lions? Is it in the email?
They said they would post as soon as possible for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks?
Okay.
So,
Just out of curiosity, do we grant, given that they're doing it at St. Edward's Church?
They're asking for sandwich board sign approval from us, advertising. Yeah.
Okay.
the Medfield Foundation requests permission to post signs for the Angel Run for one additional week from November 29th, 2021 to December 5th, 2021. We've been asked to sign certificates of achievement for Carl Andrews Erickson, Antonio P. King, and Jan Philip Passas for attaining the rank of Eagle Scout, and request a vote to approve a one-day beer wine license to the Zulo Gallery for their annual holiday exhibit, first Thursday on December 2nd, 2021, from 5:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. Any questions, comments, adjustments on the consent agenda? Motion.
I'll recuse myself from the Medfield Foundation one.
Okay.
Okay. I move that we, you want me to do them separately, or?
Assuming he'll just recuse from the whole thing.
Oh, okay. I move that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, meeting minutes, we don't have any.
Yep, we're working on that.
Working on them. All right, town administrator updates.
I just want to say a huge thank you to Marianne Benaldi, our town clerk, Tracy Clank, our election warden, and all of the election staff for their incredible work, both at the special town meeting and the special town election. They processed over 4,000 voters yesterday. It was steady from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. I was there for most of it, and they were still laughing and smiling at the end of the day. We are incredibly lucky to have all of them. Just huge thanks to them for the work they've done this last week.
Next meeting dates, right now it's December 7th for the tax classification hearing, and December 14th in December.
You're going to have a conflict on the 14th. I'm out of town. That's my first and last business trip of the year.
Do we want to do the 21st instead? The 7th and the 21st?
That works for me if you're good with that. I'm out from the 13th to the 15th, so you could do it on the 16th too, if for whatever reason we didn't want to get that close to the holidays. But
I'm not going anywhere. Anyone have a problem with the 21st?
21st works for me.
Nick, for you?
I'm around.
Bill, 21st, good?
I'll be here.
That works for you, all right. All right, so let's make it then make it the 7th.
I told you, no overnight parking.
And the 21st. All right, and if we have to add another one, we'll add another one, and we'll do the
Okay,
forum.
thank you.
That would
I
be a
appreciate it.
separate
Yep.
date, once,
Great.
you know,
Okay.
the other committees weigh in. All right, Selectmen reports, Pete.
Held office hours, had a lot of attendance last Friday. The Medfield Food Cupboard had me come and read the proclamation that declared Medfield Food Cupboard Day on November 9 at their annual meeting that day. And it was very impressive to hear their report of what they've done over the past year. They are a very well-organized group, very impressive. I've been to a couple of the Town of Medfield Climate Action Plan, Tomcat meetings to draft the climate action plan for the town, and that's going along well. Those are well-run meetings. And then the Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund Community Board, that's in the process of doing grant awards, has been meeting to work that out. So that's should be getting announced soon, the winners of the grants. That's it.
All right, Gus.
I don't really have anything to report, other than that there's already messages coming in from people who are willing to volunteer to help with the school project going forward from here.
So I'll just note, we were all there for the Veterans Day breakfast at the Council on Aging on Thursday. I thought it was great. It was great to have that event again, to be there with both of you and with so many people I hadn't seen over the course of over the course of the past year and a half. I ended up sitting with Perry Constas at the breakfast and had a great discussion with him. And he was so enthusiastic about having been at the special town meeting. He was effusive in his praise for how it was run and managed. He was so excited to see so many people there, especially so many young people there participating. And he said, whatever you thought of the vote, he said it was a great day for democracy, and it was great to hear. Obviously, Perry's a great Medfield resident, longtime council and aging board member, so that was very, very heartening. And then I went with my 10-year-olds. We went up, I think those are the ones who came, went to the luminary lighting, the ceremony in Baxter Park that evening, which is always poignant, and Frank Alafala did a great job taking over from Al Manganello as the MC for that event. It's it gets a small crowd, but I think it's always a special event, and kudos to Michelle Doucette and her group for organizing that with the luminary bags and everything. It was really special. And I know my kids do look forward to it and remember it, and it does make an impression on them. So thanks to everyone for that. Those were two great.
On the Veterans Breakfast, my sense was that Roberta Lynch had done a lot of the organizing for that, so I think that we owe her a debt of gratitude.
I think our veterans agent as well contributed to that.
Yep. Thank you to Roberta and to Mark Bryson for his first Veterans Day as our veterans agent. So, all right, anything else? All right, well, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right. And again, sorry, I was going to apologize to everybody on Zoom for not getting to all the comments. That's all right.